Hello, everyone, and welcome. I've been talked to many friends and brethren about translating scriptures from the Hebrew into the English. It's a worldwide concern, and it all started at the Tower of Babel when our tongues were changed and we started having problems communicating one with the other. It caused a lot of dissension, a lot of confusion, and even to this day, it's kind of a problem. Actually, it's a really big problem with a lot of dispute, arguments, and lack of discernment because of it. So, do we go from the English to the Hebrew, or do we go from the Hebrew to the English? It's a worldwide phenomenon. Originally, the Torah was the covenant that was made by humanity, or in this case, primarily Israel, the 12 tribes that came out of captivity in Egypt or Mitzrayim, and at Sinai made a blood covenant with Yahuwah himself. And Moshe, he wrote everything down, and that became what we call today as the Torah. Now the Torah has evolved into what a lot of Jewish and Hebrew people would call the Tanakh. And Tanakh actually stands for, in the bottom of this picture you can see it, the Torah, the Nevi'im, which means prophets, or the translation for prophets, and the Ketuvim, or the writings, like the Psalms and Proverbs. Anyway, this is probably the most unmolested and most purest form that we have today of the original Hebrew scriptures. You can order this online, and it usually has American English on the left with the modern Hebrew writing that started in Babylon with the square type modern Hebrew characters on the right hand side. But it has been molested. It's not perfect. They use Hashem and different titles for the name Yahuwah. The changes and the deviations are minimal, so it's pretty easy to be able to find some truth by using the Tanakh. It's something that I use, not necessarily in the hard version, but I do have a hard version of the book of the Tanakh, but primarily I use it in my research and studies through a computer program, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So this, by far, since we can't get back to the original Paleo Hebrew, this is about our best choice today. The Pentateuch, what people of today actually call the Greek translation of the first 5 books of the Torah. The Greek, according to Jeremiah 10 and verse 2, is Yahuwah says that we're not supposed to learn the ways of the Goyim, the Gentiles, the common peoples. We're supposed to be a set apart nation unto Him, holy and kadosh unto Yahuwah. So this, I would say, don't even waste your time on it, because it's a pollution of the original. They put all kinds of their own traditions, doctrines, myths, philosophies, and theologies into it. And then it went from the Pentateuch into the Septuagint. And the Septuagint is just a more modern version of the Pentateuch that has more of the writings in it, Psalms, Proverbs, the prophets, etc. And it has some of the apocryphal writings in it as well. It's also in Greek, and as far as I'm concerned, and from what I can read in my studies of the original Torah, it's a pollution, and your time shouldn't be wasted on this version. The Library of Alexandria, after Alexander the Great, came and conquered what was known at that time as the world. He established this library, and every book was collected. It was translated into the Greek and the other languages, if they were not in accordance with Greek understanding and the ways of the Grecian Empire, they were destroyed. But if they kind of went along with the Hellenization influence and the Greek theology and philosophy, then it was saved in the Grecian form. Philosophy is a Hellenized concept, and it has to do with painting beautiful mental pictures, and it doesn't have anything to do with practical application. But philosophy is a Hellenized concept that came shortly after the Grecian conquest of the known world at that time. People like Plato, Aristotle, all those famous Grecian people that had their Hellenized concept, and they persuaded a lot of Hebrew people who later became known as the Hellenized Jews. And they were actually participants in the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures of the Torah and the Tanakh into the Pentateuch and the Septuagint. And then along came theology. The forefathers primarily of the Roman Catholic Church and their theological studies really got into a lot of the intermingling of traditions, doctrines, philosophies, and practical applications of the scriptures. But theology is the right hand or the daughter of philosophy, and it is not a Hebrew concept, and it's spoken against as well in Jeremiah 10 and verse 2. It's a way of the Grecian philosophers. It has nothing to do with practical application, but again, painting mental images instead of the practical application itself. Theology and philosophy and the Hellenized concept of mental thinking and the capacity of the mind and the intelligence and wisdom of the person is what brings them to salvation according to the Hellenized mind. You find salvation through intelligence and knowledge. It's a form of Gnosticism, which was an ilk or a group of Jews who became Hellenized and also deceived into this type of thinking. But it is not of the original Torah, but is Hellenized in origin. Now, do we translate the Hebrew, or do we learn the Hebrew? If we learn the Hebrew, we gain understanding in the original concepts as they were presented in the original writings. If we were to take that original writings and concepts and try to translate it into English, it loses much. And Yahuwah tells us in many places, He doesn't want us to come in and to bring Him into our world, but we're supposed to cross over and become as He is, with His language, His right rulings, His way of life, and His instruction. So, here's a scripture that tells us briefly and very precisely what we're supposed to do when it comes to learning or translating the original Torah as it was given to us. Now, The King James is up here at the top, and this is Zephaniah 3 and verse 9. For then I will turn to the people a pure language, that they may all come upon the name of the L word to serve him with one consent. Now this is really a cool program. I use it quite a bit. It's called the Interlinear Scriptures Analyzer. Now it has the Hebrew. I don't really go along with any of these vowel pointings. That was something that was added after Babylon. It's also a corruption and an addition that we're not supposed to do. And then the second line is a transliteration of the Hebrew text, which is up above. The third line is Strong's numbers. I don't use them except for trying to find a specific word throughout the scriptures and trying to find where it's at so I can continue my study in a specific word or phrase. And finally, we have the translation down below. And this translation is something that's done by the Interlinear Scriptures. It's not always accurate and it's not always true. But if we take a look at this example, we can see that then I shall turn to the peoples a lip being pure. So, Shefe Bure, pure, a pure lip, or a pure language. Okay, he's giving us a pure language, which is his language, which is Hebrew. Okay, and the reason that he gives us this language is to call out all of them in the name of, that says something I'm not going to repeat, but if you look up here, it's the Yod, He, and the Wa, and the He, Yahuwah, to serve of him shoulder blade one, or up above, as you can see, with one consent, with one shoulder. So Yahuwah himself tells us in his scriptures that he has given us a pure language, and he wants us to learn that pure language so that we can serve him in unity.